Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome on board. Let's learn to fly this beautiful machine, the Boeing 747-8. The default 747 has many things missing in it, so I'm using the Salty mod that's available on FlightSim.2 for free with a lot of added functionality. I just put the link in the description. Now let me give you a quick tour of the cockpit, starting with overhead panel. Minded behind the overhead panel, we have the circuit breakers, and behind that is overhead maintenance panel, but they are not modeled and we won't be using it anyway. So let's get back to overhead panel. The general layout here will be similar across the Boeing fleet. Over here we have iris switches. Then is the electrical panel over here, the hydraulics panel. That is again in-op. The switches are always on auto. Then we have fire panel here for all 4 engines, for APU and also for cargo. Then is the fuel panel. Here's the anti-ice wipers, window heat switches, passenger oxygen, yaw damper. Then we have the pressurization and air conditioning panel. On the lower side is the internal and external lighting panel. Looking down, we have the glare shield that includes the EFIS panel for both pilots, the mode control panel for autopilot, display control panel for showing various systems in optic displays. That has been modeled pretty well in the Salty mod, and not much of them are available on the default version. And then we have 6 displays. That's left forward panel, right forward panel, center forward panel, left and right sidewall that includes pilot oxygen mask as well. That's forward aisle stand, control stand, an aft aisle stand, and that's just about it. Now let's take our seat and get started with this cold and dark cockpit. And as usual, we'll be starting with electrical power procedures that goes in sequence of direct current first, the DC power first, and then the AC power, that's the alternating current. And here's the flow. Battery switch on. Verify off light is extinguished. Standby power selector auto. Hydraulic demand pump selector off. They're always on auto, we cannot change it. Windshield wipers off. Alternate flap selector off. Landing gear lever down. Flaps position indication and flap lever agree. And then electrical power establish. Now how do we do that? For the AC power, let's take external power for a time being while we start our APU. Now before starting APU in real life, we always ask the engineer and do an APU fire test. Once that is satisfied, we start up the APU. But in this mod, there's no fire test. It's inoperable. So we'll assume the fire test is done and let's start the APU. And while we wait for it, we'll do the preliminary pre-flight procedures. Okay, starting with iris switches all 3 to nav. And then we can see iris time to align here on the ND. And then let's do the FMC Preflight. Now I've chosen Muscat to Dubai, a short flight, and have already filed it on SimBrief. So here we can go to Salty and put in your SimBrief ID inside, and then we can retrieve the flight plan directly. So back to FMC. First page, let's check the model, the thrust rating, nav data, then pause in it. Departure airport, Muscat, Oscar, Mike, Sierra. Let's put the GPS coordinates. In the next page, here, instead of putting the departure and arrival, we can directly request the route from SimBrief. So request flight plan, request, execute, and it might take a while for the route to load, so give it some time. Okay, then let's put in the departure just to be sure. Runway 26 right, Dapok 2 Papa departure. And arrival set Dubai for runway 30 left, Imped 3 Charlie. Then let's go to the perf page. Let's put in reserves from the flight plan, which was about 5 tons. So I'll put 5.0. Cost index was 200. Cost index 200. Flight level is already set. Next page, let's take climb 2 for better engine life. And takeoff reference page. Let's take flaps 10 for takeoff. No assumed temperature. V1, VR, V2 comes in automatically. Next page, let's check for thrust reduction and acceleration altitude, which is checked. So FMC Preflight is complete. Now let's do the pre-flight procedure and checklist. Overhead panel once again. Window heat on, navigation lights. After overhead panel, this oxygen test. Then we do the EFIS panel. Let's set barrow, let's set the QNH. Now, MCP, let's put the V2 over here. What was our V2? Okay, let's set that. Departure runway heading is 264. Let's arm 11 beam nav. Altitude, let's put 11,000 feet. I'll tell you why later. Coming down, auto brakes RTO. Speed brake retracted. Flaps are up. Thrust levers idle. Engine fuel cutoff switches all cut off. And TCAS panel, let's put 2000 as squawk. And now let's do the pre-flight checklist. Now here, as you can see, we've got electronic checklist here available, and there are 2 items that are gray and there are 2 that are ticked and green. Now in the electronic checklist, there are basically 2 types of items. One is an open loop item and the other is closed loop item. Now the closed looped item are those whose position the flight computers can sense, like parking brakes. If you set it, the position is known by the computer, and that's why the computer ticks it green already. But whether the flight instruments and the oxygen test, it doesn't know, so we have to tick it manually. And how do we do that? We use this cursor key. You can scroll this key to move the cursor in the display in the checklist, and then click it to check the item. And also the green items are not to be read. So let's do the pre-flight checklist once again. Pre-flight checklist. Oxygen is set. Flight instruments, heading altimeter is checked. Pre-flight checklist complete. So now we can get the clearance and do our pushback and taxi. That's it for this video. I'll get you in the next one where we'll push back the airplane, start the engines and taxi out. So ciao for now.